So today is class 11. That puts us 25% through the semester because I think we only get to 43. So I'm going to show you a brief demo again on how to annotate your spreadsheet files so that the grader is able to find the answer. Just as a reminder, your next homework assignment, homework 4, that's a lengthy one. It's got 9 problems, and each of them require a little bit of thought and interpretation. So don't wait to the last minute for that assignment. I think that you should definitely spend some time over the weekend looking at homework 4. And the earlier you start, if you get stuck on something, then you can talk to another student, or you can come see me during my office hours, or you can call me on Teams and we can discuss it. So get an early start, and that leads to a better result. A week from today, we won't have a face-to-face class meeting here in the classroom. I'll just post a lecture video online. I'll put the link for that in Blackboard. I'll also email you a link, and then there's no attendance component for that class meeting on Friday the 19th. You can just watch it whenever you like. And then the following class meeting after that, then we'll have our first exam on Monday the 22nd. I've got some more info to share with you about the exam. So we're going to continue today in some topics that are addressed in Chapter 5 and talking about present worth analysis for decision making, choosing from among alternatives. So we're going to continue talking about 2 more methods to deal with the fact of that sometimes different alternatives have different useful lives. That's one of the big hang-ups we get when we're comparing alternatives, is that one piece of equipment lasts for a long time, the other one doesn't last for as long. So then how do you compare them? That's kind of the conundrum that we have to grapple with in order to do present worth analysis. But before all that, I just wanted to tell you regarding exam 1. So we're going to do that in class, which means that there's only 50 minutes available. And so I don't want anybody to do poorly on the exam because they didn't have enough time. I think that the person who knows what they're doing and doesn't mess around would be able to finish that exam in probably 20 minutes. Like if you just went straight through. But if you need to stop and think for a moment, and then maybe you make a wrong turn and you have to backtrack and fix it, I still think that you'll have enough time if you know the material and if you know what you're doing. But if you've never practiced this stuff outside of class, or you did the homework but you didn't really understand it, you may not know the material well enough that you feel like 50 minutes is enough time. So the time constraint really, I think, only comes into play for students who haven't yet mastered the material. But if you put in a good faith effort to do the in-class exercise, do the homework, read the textbook, think about it, like do a few extra reps and so on, then 50 minutes will be plenty of time for the test. So I'm going to provide you with the factor equations and the factor table, like a 4% table, 5% table, whatever the case may be for the problems that I provide. If I ask you to do the factor method, then I'll provide the interest rate table for that. And in addition to those provided resources, you can bring 1 page, both sides of a letter-sized paper, of anything that you want to put in there. It can be notes, equations, reminders, encouraging notes from your grandma, anything that you think will help you get through that test. You can put it on 1 page. And then you also need to be sure to bring your laptop with Excel installed, because there will be a problem I ask you to solve using Microsoft Excel. So does anybody have questions about these details?
Do you have any general idea of how many questions there will be?
Normally, I think I said in the last class meeting that we start off with some concept questions, and it's usually 1 page of those. So, like 4 or 5 short answer questions. And then after that, how many questions there are depends on if they're really simple, medium, or kind of extended length. If I gave you only extended length problems, then there'd be probably like 3 problem solving extended length. But I may give you something as easy as saying, here's the nominal interest rate, what's the effective interest rate? And that's like a low complexity problem. That's really simple. And so depending on the balance of how many easy versus medium questions, like problem solving, probably another 5 plus or minus. Other questions? But that's just an estimate because I haven't written the exam yet. Okay. Regarding the annotation of spreadsheets, let me just give you an example. Here's a solution for some future homework assignment that we haven't got to yet. I'm just pulling up the Excel file on that. So when you have a problem, you need to answer the question, like do all the calculations, and then make it really obvious by bold, italics, highlighting, like what's the answer to the question that's been asked. And you have to explain your reasoning. You know, the supporting decision criteria has to be included with the answer in order for it to be right. So you say not only, you know, what's the right answer, but why is that the right answer? How did you know that was the right answer? Like what is the standard that allows you to decide one way or the other? So this is a problem you'll get to later in the semester, and I just wanted to point out that through bolding and shading with a bright yellow color, that's how I'm drawing the grader's attention to where on the spreadsheet my answer to the question is. Because your spreadsheet may look different. It's not going to have exactly the same columns and exactly the same cells. So, you know, your answer could be over here or over there. And just to save the grader the uncertainty of trying to wonder, did they actually know it? You have to be really explicit in identifying your answer. So please add those annotations anytime you submit an Excel file with a homework assignment or an exam. So this phrase, decision criteria, I emphasized in class on Wednesday, and I'll revisit that again with just the reminder that when you compare options, you know, you can buy this equipment or that equipment. You have to have some rule that tells you which of the alternatives to select. So we're doing present worth analysis right now. And the decision criteria for present worth analysis is if projects are mutually exclusive, which means you're only choosing one of the options, then select the project with the higher positive present worth. And so that is the rule that tells you which of the options to choose. So, you know, you do the calculation of option A, do the calculation of option B, and you find out what the present worth of each of them is. But if the question asked which should be selected, you have to explicitly say which one of them should be selected and why. So be sure that you answer the question, not just provide the supporting calculations that would allow someone to answer the question, but you do the calculations, answer the question, and say why. Everybody understand that? Because I hate taking off points on an exam when you got the right answer, but you didn't say, like you do the right calculations, but then you don't actually answer the question that was asked. Like, because doing the calculations is most of the way there. And I do give partial credit on exams. So, you know, on a 10-point problem, if you did the right calculations, but you didn't include the decision criteria and you didn't actually explicitly answer the question, maybe you'll still get 8 out of the 10 points, but I want to give you 10 out of 10 points. So do the calculations, answer the question, and mention the decision criteria and explain how that applied in that particular situation. All right, and another really important piece of terminology that I wanted to revisit was the idea of a study period. It's the amount of time that you're trying to analyze, or it's how long you'd expect equipment to be in operation. But the study period is just the time frame that you are comparing alternatives across. And one of the rules I mentioned in class last time is that if you've got two options, they both have to last the same amount of time. That because of the time value of money, you can't compare equipment unless they're both covering the same study period. So the first thing that we did, the least common multiples, LCM method, we talked about on Wednesday. That was how we synced up through repeating the options a certain number of cycles so that they both ended with the same study period. That was one of the tools that we used, was LCM. And so here's just a visual reminder of how we did that last time. We had one of the options which lasted for 6 years. Another one of the options lasted for 9. And the least common multiple is a study period of 18 years, which means purchasing the item and using it through its useful life 3 times for this computer-controlled equipment. And then the option B, we did 2 cycles of it. And what are some of the reminders that I gave you last time about like mistakes to avoid when you're doing LCM? Yeah.
Make sure not to have the initial sort of down payment
Yeah.
also at the end.
Good, yeah. Some people just get kind of in the habit of having the down arrow every so often. And so if you bought the item again in the terminal year, that's a mistake. Because every time you buy the item, that's getting you a certain period of revenue in the years after that. So avoid the mistake, the temptation of buying the item again in the last year. So that's a really important one. There was another that I also mentioned. Does anybody remember what the other mistake is that sometimes people make?
You can't treat the other added values like the, I don't know the actual proper terminology, but you can't treat the other values as what they say they are. So like that 11,500 in the middle.
Yeah.
You'd have to multiply it by.
So it may be more expensive in the future. So that was just a warning about repeatability. This method assumes that the cycles can be repeated. And you're right, the warning that I gave is sometimes they can, sometimes they can't. So if you have some information about how much the item is going to cost in the future, you can apply adjustment factors. You know, if you said, well, due to inflation, I think the second time I purchase it, it's going to be more, and the third time it'll be even more. So if you have guidance that you can apply for the future cycles, feel free to apply it. But if not, you just repeat as the details are given. So in your homework and in the exams, I'll probably just tell you to assume repeatability, and you won't correct for the future increases in cost. But you're right, that was another one of the warnings, was it has inherently the repeatability assumption. And then another warning I gave you was sometimes it's tempting to buy the item again in year 7 instead of year 6, because people see like, well, I've already got an arrow in year 6. It's the arrow up, that last year of revenue. But the reminder is that you want to have a continuous and unbroken period of equipment in operation. And so if this option A, if it's finished at the end of the 6th year, then you need to buy it again at the beginning of the 7th year, which is times 6. So the first year goes from 0 to 1. The second year goes from 1 to 2. So here at times 6, the first cycle is complete. The equipment is finished. And you instantly need to have the next cycle of the equipment available. So you buy the item at the same time that you get your last year of revenue. So don't have like a gap year between cycles is the warning. So that was LCM. And we used Excel to do it. It's a nice tool. The decision criteria here, we're applying the MAR. Anybody remember what this acronym MAR stands for?
Minimal accepted rate of return.
Very good. I'd give that full credit on a concept question. I think the way that I defined it is minimum attractive rate of return. But attractive and acceptable, those mean the same thing. So minimum attractive rate of return or minimum acceptable rate of return, it's like a policy decision that organizations make to say, what interest rate do we have to receive for this project to be justifiable? So a company wouldn't want to borrow money and pay 10% interest if the money that they were borrowing is going to be put onto a project that only generates 8% interest. That just wouldn't make sense. To borrow money at 10 and invest it in something that's going to pay 8. You're going to lose if you do that. So the decision criteria is that when you discount all of the future amounts to the present at the MAR, then choose the alternative with the highest non-negative present worth. So option A, option B, which of these orange arrows is taller? Which is the most profitable? That's the decision criteria. All right, so the present worth analysis says take everything to the present. reality says most equipment doesn't last exactly the same duration. It can be expected whether it's computer equipment or manufacturing equipment or construction equipment, whatever the case may be, some things last a long time, some things don't last as long. And anytime you've got options that don't terminate over the same study period, then we have to find some way to make it the same before we can apply present worth analysis. And so LCM did multiple cycles. Another option that we can do is we could either make the one that's too long, so option B is too long, we can make it shorter. Or option A is too short and we can make it longer. So if you've got your phone out, will you please put it away? Thank you. So we just need to make it so they're the same length of time. And so the contract services approach is a way of taking the option that's too short, option A is too short. Contract services makes the short one longer. And the idea with contract services is rather than buying the item again and then having a full cycle of ownership, buy the item once and then just rent something similar for the years after it wears out until the end of the study period for the longer option. So option B is longer. It's defining the study period as 9 years. And so contract services just says, let's take the short option, do it, and then when that equipment is worn out and disposed of, we'll just go to Sunbelt Rentals or Bosley or someplace, and we're going to rent the equipment for however many years that takes us to the end of the study period. So this is just showing, like, instead of buying it for $11,500, let's rent it every year for $4,000, and then we can assume that we still get those same revenue amounts of $5,000 for option A. So that's contract services. And to do it, to apply this method, you have to know how much the equipment would be to rent. So, you know, that's just getting an estimate from a supplier for rental services for the temporary duration that it's needed. Does contract services make sense to everybody from a conceptual standpoint? All right, so you're just leasing or renting something similar. It's interchangeable, allows you to accomplish the same goal. So now the two options have the same useful life. Option A becomes one cycle of that shorter duration equipment followed by 3 years of leasing. Option B is one cycle of the longer life equipment. So, yeah, let me give you this in-class exercise. Let's put this to practice, get a chance to use contract services. Okay, so contract services has lengthened option A with 3 years of leasing. So what's the present value of option A? Well, it's the $11,500 that's already at the present. So that's the initial purchase price of option A. And then I add the present value of the $5,000 in revenue. So P/A, find P given A at 4% interest and N equals 9. So in parentheses there, that's just my little summary, a reminder of what factor I'm going to go look up off of the table. So it's plus the revenue, 9 years of the revenue, minus this $4,000 in costs. And I'm going to multiply two factors together because it's two things I have to do. I want to find P given A of the annual series, which is going to make it this lump sum value in year 6. And so that's what's in this first parentheses, the P of A, 4% interest, N equals 3. And then once I aggregate it together as a lump sum in year 6, with this second factor, I'm going to move it using find P given F from year 6 to year 0. So find P given F, I equals 4%, N equals 6. And so then here's the substitutions of the values. So the 11,500 purchase plus the revenue, which has been taken to the present, minus, this is the leasing expense, the $4,000 per year leasing expense. The first factor was find P given A. The second factor was find P given F. So I just multiply the two factors together. And in the end, the present worth of option A, if we round it off to 4 digits, because one of these factors had 4 digits, so I've only got 4 significant figures, so it's 16,900 is the right answer for the present worth of option A. Then option B, a little bit easier, because all I need to do is find P given A, add it to what's already at the present, and it has a present worth of 14,285. That one, just because I have 5 digits on the only factor that I've used, I can round that off to the nearest dollar instead of the nearest $10. And then I have to state the answer to the question, which option was better? I'd say option A is better because it has the higher present worth. That's how I knew it was better. That's the decision criteria that I applied. So I've done the calculations, I answered the question, and I provided my supporting rationale. Any questions about this first contract services example?
So for option A, where you multiply the two factors together,
Yeah.
would it also be acceptable to do P of A with N equals 9 minus P of A with N equals 6?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
I got a pretty similar, I think I got the exact same answer using that.
So you assumed that you said, like, for example, there's P of A of 4,000, with A is 4,000, and then you just subtract out the part that's not there?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you got the right answer,
Yeah.
that tells you that it works, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's creative. I haven't thought of it that way, but I guess that would work.
Okay.
Other questions? All right. So that's contract services. Everybody gets the main idea there. We want the study period to be the same for both options. One of them was too short, so we make it longer. The other thing we can do is we can take the one that's too long and make it shorter. And how do you make it shorter? You just sell it early. Instead of holding on to it until it's totally useless, you just dispose of it on the secondary market. So in other words, you sell it early. So if you have a car that will last for 10 years and you're comparing it to a car that would last for 6, this is just saying the car that lasts longer, sell it in year 6, and then take that lump sum value for the longer option and add it to the end of the cash flow diagram. So that's why it's called early termination, is you're taking the one that lasts longer and you're shortening the cash flow diagram. So let's take a look at the back side of the in-class exercise. The second problem. No, that's not it. All right. So option B, I'm giving you this table of its resale value over time. So it costs $16,200, and then over time it's becoming less valuable as it gradually wears out. So what I'm saying is sell option B so that this cash flow diagram lasts the same amount of time as option A. And then just assume instead of getting the revenue in years 7, 8, and 9, you don't get that revenue because you've sold the item early, but you do get the salvage value or the resale value of the equipment. So according to the numbers here, option A is better. Option A is better because the decision criteria says choose the option that has the higher non-negative present worth. And so like if it had a negative present worth, that tells you don't do the project. It's not profitable. A negative present worth says that there's more outflows than inflows, so the project is not suitable. Here we have two suitable alternatives. Both of them is going to yield more than the MAR. When you discount the future revenues at the MAR and it's positive, that tells you that your project's rate of return is greater than 10%. So there is leftover profits. But let's look at what's wrong with option B. Like, why does option B not make sense? It's because it's more expensive, but the reason why it costs more is that it lasts longer. And so if you're going to sell option B early, then you've paid more for the equipment than you needed to, and it does have some salvage value, but that salvage value is pretty measly compared to the revenues that you would have gotten if you just held on to it for its full useful life. Because in years 7, 8, and 9, you would have gotten $4,100 each year, but you're foregoing that for a single lump sum payment of $5,400. So the problem with option B is just the resale values aren't favorable. You know, you're not getting very much as a resale compared to what it could have done during those remaining 3 years. And so if 6 years truly is the study period that you're interested in, then option A is better for a 6-year study period. But if this is something that you plan on doing for a very long time, then maybe you'd be better off with multiple cycles. You know, so LCM doesn't take the resale values into account. So this is just kind of an illustration of how you have to be really thoughtful about deciding what your study period is. So if you are, let's say, a construction company that's working on Interstate 64 and you think, well, this project's going to be 6 years long and I want to have equipment for 6 years, but then I'm retiring. I'm going to sell the company to someone else, so I don't care so much about beyond 6 years. Then maybe you'd get the shorter lived equipment because that's your study period. But if you're saying, I'm young, I'm going to use this equipment for a really long time, I want it to last longer, then how much you can sell it for if you terminate it early, that's like a poor way of analyzing it if you're going to be in business for the long term. But anyways, now you've learned LCM, contract services, and early termination. Those are our 3 methods for dealing with alternatives that have different useful lives. And if they have different useful lives, you have to do something before you can apply present worth analysis to pick the best alternative. Wednesday, homework 4 is due. I think you ought to really buckle down and make some good progress on that over the weekend. And then next Friday, we've got that online class, Monday the 22nd, exam 1. That's it for today. I've got office hours after this if you'd like to stop by. If you came in late, let me know so I can get you on the attendance.